The morning my husband carried a pale blue bakery box through our front door, holding it out like he was offering me something rare, I almost let myself believe things were finally changing between us. Almost. 9.5 years of marriage teaches you things you never wanted to know. And one of the things I'd learned about Raymond was that his smile, the one he was wearing that morning, all warmth and good intentions, was a performance he put on when he needed something. I recognized it the way you recognize a song you've heard too many times. But I smiled back. I told him it was beautiful. I asked if we were celebrating something. He said, "Just you." What I know now, what I've spent the last 8 months piecing together from police reports, trial exhibits, and my own husband's eventual confession, is that before he drove that cake home, he had made one stop. The parking garage beneath his office building on Tryon Street. Security footage recovered by investigators showed his Mercedes pulling in at 11:48 a.m. The car parked in his reserved space. He sat in the back seat for 13 minutes. Then he drove away. Inside the pale blue box was a dark chocolate ganache cake with raspberry filling from Magnolia's Bakery on Providence Road. The same place we'd celebrated our first anniversary back in 2015, back when we were still people who did things like that. He even ordered the same size, the same pale blue fondant ribbon around the base. He knew it was my favorite. He'd counted on it. And before he carried it through our door, he had used a syringe to inject a clear, odorless compound into the center of the bottom tier, where the chocolate was thickest and the flavors most concentrated. Tucked beneath the ribbon was a card in his own handwriting. "Every bite is as sweet as our life together. Happy anniversary, my love." By the time the sun went down that evening, someone had eaten that cake. It just wasn't me. I should tell you who Raymond was. Not the version he performed for clients, or the version I introduced to my family at Thanksgiving every year, or even the version I married, but the one who had been sitting across the breakfast table from me in those last 2 years, barely present, barely polite. He was a wealth manager at Whitmore Capital Group in uptown Charlotte, North Carolina. Good at his job in the way that certain precise, controlled people are good at things that require patience and attention to detail. He made partner at 40. He drove a car that announced itself before he got out of it. He wore the same brand of watch his father had worn. And he liked when people noticed. When we met, I was 26 and had just taken a job teaching art at Eastover Elementary in the Dilworth neighborhood. He was 32, already moving fast, and there was something about that contrast, his ambition, my contentment, that seemed to interest him at first. He used to say he loved how I didn't need anything from him, how I was just happy. I should have understood then that he saw that as a feature, not a person. Still, the early years were real. He made coffee for me every morning, 2 sugars and oat milk, and left it on the bathroom counter where I'd find it after my shower. He remembered the names of my students. He drove 45 minutes each way to pick up a specific brand of oil paints I'd mentioned once, just because. Those small kindnesses were real, and I held on to them for longer than I should have. The person who replaced him, somewhere around year 7, I still don't fully understand. What I know now is that about 2.5 years before our 10th anniversary, Raymond acquired a new client. Her name was Bianca Holloway. She was 34, sharp, and she'd built a mid-size real estate development company from a $200,000 inheritance into something worth considerably more. She brought Raymond a significant book of business, and Raymond brought her what I can only describe as an exit from his own life, a different version of himself he seemed to prefer. I didn't know she existed. I want to be clear about that. I had suspicions the way you have suspicions when someone stops looking at you, when their phone becomes a thing they carry face down everywhere, when they develop a new habit of going to bed after you and waking up before you. But I had no name, no face, and I had convinced myself that the worst thing happening in my marriage was a slow, survivable estrangement. What was actually happening was worse than that. In reviewing her portfolio statements, Bianca had found irregularities she couldn't account for. Small fund transfers at first, then larger ones, a pattern that, when she had a forensic accountant examine them, pointed clearly to Raymond. He'd been skimming. Not a large amount by any single client's standard, but enough, spread across enough accounts, to add up to something that would end his license, his career, and his freedom if it came to light. Instead of going to the SEC, she went to Raymond. She wanted marriage. She wanted Raymond to stop treating her like a secret and start treating her like a destination. She gave him a deadline. She told him that if he didn't make it happen, she'd take what she knew public. Raymond was cornered from every direction. He couldn't divorce me cleanly. Too much of our shared wealth was documented under my name, starting with the house which we'd purchased with money from my grandmother's estate and which my attorney had structured wisely years ago. He couldn't pay Bianca off without triggering his firm's compliance systems. He couldn't keep stalling indefinitely. I know all of this because it's in the record now. It was in the notes investigators found on his phone. He had actually written it out like a business problem to be assessed. Pros and cons, risk variables, timelines. The solution he arrived at, I've had to read it many times to believe it was real, was listed simply as remove the obstacle. The obstacle was me. The day of our anniversary, I left the house at 11:30 in the morning. Raymond had been up since 6. He'd been quieter than usual, which I noticed, but I put it down to work. We barely spoke at breakfast. I poured coffee for both of us, ate half a piece of toast, and told him I'd be at the school most of the day. The spring art fair was that afternoon, a significant event for my students, some of whom had been working on their pieces for 6 weeks, and I'd promised to stay through setup and breakdown. I'll be home by 7 at the latest, I told him. We can do dinner then. Sure, he said. He was reading something on his phone. I drove to school. I set up display boards in the gymnasium with 2 other teachers. I hung 43 paintings, drawings, and collage pieces on temporary walls, spacing them with the care I give every year because I want my students to feel that their work is worth seeing. I wore a green linen dress and comfortable shoes. I drank bad coffee from the teacher's lounge. By noon, as I was in a conversation with a parent about daughter's charcoal self-portrait, and I was genuinely fine. I had no idea what was being prepared 12 miles away. Raymond had picked up the cake from Magnolia's at noon and paid cash, a detail the cashier remembered clearly afterward. He brought the box upstairs to his office on the 32nd floor, told his assistant to come in, and handed it over with the kind of instructions Raymond always gave, brief, flat, and without room for follow-up questions. Take this to the house, Raymond said. He was already scrolling his calendar. Give it to whoever's waiting for me. Tell her to keep it in the fridge until tonight. His assistant's name was Tom. He was 23 years old and had been working for Raymond for 11 months. He was the kind of young man who took his responsibilities seriously and genuinely did not want to make mistakes. He also had 11 months of very specific experience that was about to matter enormously. In the early weeks of his employment, a handful of errands had gone to the house in Dilworth. But that stopped by month 3. For the better part of a year, every personal errand Tom ran on Raymond's behalf ended at the same address. A condominium building on South Tryon Street in Uptown Charlotte, 15th floor, Unit 1504. He'd been there enough times that he knew the security desk guard by name. He didn't need the visitor log explained to him. The woman on the 15th floor always answered the door barefoot. She kept the television loud. She tipped well. When Raymond said, "Take this to the house," Tom's mind produced one image, one address. He picked up the pale blue box. He took the elevator down. He drove to South Tryon Street, parked in the visitor space he always used, and rode up to the 15th floor. Bianca answered in a silk robe, her hair still damp from the shower. Tom told her the package was from Mr. Collins, a special delivery for the evening. She should keep it refrigerated. There was a card. Bianca took the box with both hands. She looked at the ribbon. She found the card and read it. Tom told me later, after everything, when he called to apologize for the 4th or 5th time, that her whole face changed when she read those words, like someone who had been waiting a long time for a door to open and had finally heard the lock turn. She gave Tom a $100 bill. She closed the door. At 2:15 in the afternoon, I was crouched down beside a second grader named Noah who was explaining to me very patiently that the painting in the gymnasium corner, which I had privately assessed as a bear, was actually a horse. I said I could see it now that he mentioned it. Said, the tail is the giveaway. I said he was absolutely right. At that same moment, 45 minutes after Bianca took her first bite, her hands began to lose feeling. She had eaten nearly half the cake by then. She'd photographed it, the ribbon, the card, the Magnolia's logo, and posted it for her friends with a caption I later saw in the investigators' screenshots. She was texting, eating, imagining a future she would never reach. The cramping came suddenly, centered in her midsection, severe enough that she pushed back from the table. She stood and the room shifted. Cold sweat broke across her forehead. She reached for her phone and her fingers wouldn't cooperate the way they should have. She went down. Her neighbor in Unit 1502 heard the impact through the shared wall and called building security as a precaution. Security found her on the living room floor at 2:51 p.m. The remains of the pale blue bakery box were visible on the dining table behind her. The anniversary card had landed face up on the floor near her outstretched hand. The paramedics came, they worked. It wasn't enough. Bianca Holloway was pronounced dead at Atrium Health Carolina's Medical Center at 5:22 p.m. Raymond's meeting with overseas investors ran until 4:30. His phone had been on silent. He checked his messages in the elevator on the way down and found 14 missed calls. 3 from Tom, 2 from numbers he didn't recognize, 1 from Bianca's cell, several from a Charlotte-Mecklenburg County exchange he associated with municipal offices. He called Tom first, I think, because some part of him already knew, and wanted to delay knowing more. Tom told him in a voice barely coherent with panic. He said he'd taken the package to the usual place. He said the woman there had gotten very sick. He said the paramedics had come. He said he was at the hospital now and there were police officers present and he didn't know what to do. Raymond stood on the sidewalk outside his office building for a moment. Then he flagged down a cab and told the driver to take him to Atrium Health Carolina's Medical Center on Blythe Boulevard. I missed Tom's first call because I was in the school parking lot helping load folding tables into a colleague's truck. I missed the second because the reception was spotty near the gym exit. The third came through at 5:47, and I answered it with my arms tired and my mind still partially on the art fair and the leftover cookies someone had brought for the teachers. He was crying so hard I made him stop and breathe before I asked him to try again. The second time through, I understood. I sat on the truck's tailgate for a long moment after he finished. I looked at the horizon. There was a band of pink and orange along the roofline across the street where the sun was going down. I thought, very clearly and calmly, I need to get there. I don't remember much of the drive except following the GPS and keeping both hands on the wheel. When I pulled into the hospital parking deck, I sat in my car for about 90 seconds before I trusted my legs enough to carry me through the entrance. Tom was on a waiting bench just inside the ER doors. His face looked like he hadn't slept in days. 2 uniformed officers stood nearby. A detective I didn't recognize was on his phone by the nursing station. And then, from a different corridor, I heard Raymond's footsteps on the linoleum. He came around the corner and stopped. We looked at each other across the length of that hallway. I had thought on the drive over about what I might feel when I saw him. I expected anger, or grief, or some version of fear. What I actually felt was a strange and total stillness. The specific quiet that arrives when a question you've been afraid to ask is finally answered, even if the answer is terrible. One of the officers stepped forward and asked Raymond to confirm his name. He did. The officer told him that trace amounts of a controlled toxic compound had been identified in the food remains, recovered from the scene. That the card found at the scene bore handwriting consistent with samples obtained from his office. That security footage from his building's parking garage had already been reviewed. That Tom had provided a full statement. That his financial records were being examined by a forensic accountant, pending a parallel investigation. Raymond looked at me then. I watched him understand, all at once, that there was nowhere left to go, that every door he thought was still open had just closed simultaneously. Isabel, he said. My name sounded strange in his mouth, smaller than it used to. Please. You have to know I never meant for any of this to. I know exactly what you meant, I said. He flinched. I turned to the officer and told him what he needed to know. That I had not been home that day. That no food had been delivered to me at any address. That I had been at Eastover Elementary School from 11:30 in the morning until nearly 6 in the evening, with my colleagues, with parents, with 40-some students, and their paintings, and their patient explanations of which animal was which. I had a phone full of time-stamped photographs. I would provide whatever the investigation required. Raymond was still looking at me when they put the handcuffs on. I didn't look away. I felt like I owed him that much. Not mercy, not forgiveness, just witness. I wanted him to know that I saw the whole thing clearly, that I had always been a person worth seeing. Tom called me a few weeks after the arrest. He apologized again. I told him the same thing I'll keep telling anyone who asks. He made a reasonable inference from the only information he had. Raymond had spent 11 months teaching him what the word home meant. Tom just learned the lesson too well. He found another job not long after. I wrote him a reference letter myself, and I meant every word of it. Raymond is awaiting trial. The charges include first-degree murder, securities fraud, and wire fraud. His attorney entered a not guilty plea, but the evidence, parking garage surveillance footage placing him alone with the food for 13 minutes, A burner email account traced to his IP, the syringe residue found sealed in a bag in his car, Tom's complete testimony, and the card in his own handwriting recovered from the scene, is, by all accounts, as comprehensive as these cases get. A plea arrangement is reportedly being discussed. I filed for divorce 11 days after his arrest. My attorney confirmed what I'd quietly known for years. Because the house, our savings accounts, and the bulk of our shared assets were titled under my name, starting with the inheritance from my grandmother, which I'd been careful to structure properly long before any of this. The financial settlement required very little negotiation. Raymond would leave this marriage with considerably less than he had tried to take my life to keep. I've spent time sitting with that, the smallness of it, all that planning, all that cruelty, for a version of his life he destroyed all by himself. A few weeks after everything settled into its new shape, I drove back to Magnolia's bakery on a Saturday morning. I ordered a slice of the dark chocolate ganache with raspberry filling and sat at a table near the window. The April light came in warm and direct, and I ate the whole piece slowly, the way you eat something you'd forgotten you were allowed to enjoy. It was exactly as good as I remembered. There's a version of this story where I fall apart, where I spend the next several years auditing every moment of the last decade, every morning coffee on the bathroom counter, every small kindness, asking myself what was real and what was performance, where I become someone who can't trust the next good thing, because she didn't see the bad thing coming from the person closest to her. I've decided that's not who I'm going to be. I don't have a clean theological answer for why I was safe that afternoon while someone else wasn't. I've prayed about it more than I can explain to anyone. What I keep coming back to is simpler than an answer. I was where I was supposed to be. I was doing what I was made to do. A gymnasium full of kids and their paintings and their very serious opinions about which animal was depicted in the corner. That was where I was. And it was enough. And it saved my life in a way I hadn't known I needed saving. I drove home afterward with the windows down through neighborhoods that smelled like new grass and someone's backyard grill. I pulled into my driveway, mine now, fully and officially mine, and sat with the engine off for a moment. Then I went inside and opened every window I could find, and the light came all the way in.